The rain fell as if the sky had forgotten to turn off the faucet. For 3 straight days, Seattle drowned beneath a shimmering gray veil, water pounding the ancient tiles of Ashford Manor, like 1,000 fingers knocking without pause. The mansion perched precariously atop Queen Anne Hill, so high that the buildings below looked like neon-lit toy blocks. Stained glass windows towered overhead, century-old oak frames, marble floors icy cold, despite the roaring fire in the main hall. The air smelled of old wood beeswax and a loneliness you could almost hold in your hands. Eleanor Whitaker, everyone called her Ellie, stood on a wooden ladder taller than her head sleeves rolled to the elbows, wiping each pane of the weeping angel stained glass. She was only 24, but her green eyes already carried the weariness of someone who had slept under Portland bridges for 2 winters straight. Cracked hands, tiny calluses dusted with the grime of time. Brown hair tied back with an old rubber band, damp strands clinging to her cheeks. Mrs. Margaret Crowley, the 63-year-old housekeeper, stood at the foot of the ladder, hands on hips. "Finish the portrait gallery before the young master returns, Eleanor. Not a single streak." "Yes, ma'am," Ellie answered softly, voice hoarse from the cold. Mrs. Crowley nodded, her high heels clicking sharply on the marble as she disappeared behind the double doors. Ellie kept wiping each motion slow, as if afraid to wake someone sleeping inside these walls. She had been working at Ashford Manor for 9 days, and every step on the spiral staircase still felt like walking into someone else's dream, a dream where she had no name. The portrait gallery stretched endlessly, more than 30 paintings lining both walls from great-grandfather Benjamin Ashford. The first to clear the forests in 1898, to sons in blazers with starched collars, eyes staring straight ahead as if they were still alive and judging whoever passed. Ellie cleaned from the first to the 10th dust, dancing in the dim light of the crystal chandelier. At the 11th portrait, she froze. The rag slipped from her hand. The boy in the painting was about 11, thin black hair, tousled brown eyes, too large for his small face, a half smile as if he were trying to hide something deeply sad. The gold lettering beneath the frame read, "Benjamin Ashford photographed October 2009, St. Agnes Orphanage, Seattle." Ellie's heart clenched like a fist. She remembered that winter. The winter St. Agnes ran out of coal in the 3rd week of December. She was 9 tiny, clutching the last loaf of bread in the communal kitchen. That night, a new boy arrived, burning with fever lips, purple curled under a threadbare blanket. No one cared. She broke the loaf in half and pressed a piece into the delirious boy's hand. "Mama Ellie," he mumbled through the fever, his tiny fingers clutching hers. "Don't go." Ellie touched the frame fingertips, trembling. That boy's name was Ben. Quiet, skinny Ben, who sat at the back of Bible class drawing paper boats and sailing them down imaginary rivers. 23 years had passed. Now he hung here, painted in oils, wearing a tailored suit on the wall of a house where she was just the cleaner, earning $14 an hour. Tears rolled down Ellie's cheeks, dripping onto the cold marble. She quickly wiped them away with her sleeve, terrified Mrs. Crowley would notice. But inside her a storm fiercer than the rain outside was gathering. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the rain still hadn't stopped. Ellie was wiping the final step when the low rumble of an engine echoed from the main gate. Mrs. Crowley nearly ran into the hall. Black skirt, billowing voice sharp. "The young master is home. Everyone to your places." Ellie scrambled to gather her bucket and rags, racing toward the servants' stairs. But her feet felt rooted. She didn't make it. The front doors burst open. Cold wind rushed in, swoon, carrying the scent of rain and expensive sandalwood cologne. Benjamin Ashford stepped inside. 6'3", broad-shouldered gray cashmere coat reaching his knees, black hair wet and falling across his forehead. Those brown eyes still too large, still sad, but now sharpened by things they shouldn't have seen. The valet hurried after him with an umbrella, but he waved it away, folding the black umbrella himself and placing it in the brass stand. Mrs. Crowley curtsied deeply. "Welcome home, Master Benjamin. Everything is ready." Ben nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in a polite smile that never reached his eyes. He shrugged off his coat, handed it to a servant, then turned unexpectedly toward the portrait gallery, where Ellie stood frozen, behind the red velvet curtain, only her shoulder visible. Ellie's heart pounded so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. She shrank back, gripping the broom handle, breath ragged. Ben walked slowly down the gallery, polished leather shoes, striking the marble in perfect rhythm. He stopped in front of the 11th portrait, the one with the 11-year-old boy. His fingers brushed the wooden frame as if stroking a memory from very far away. Ellie's throat went dry. She wanted to run, to disappear, to scream. "It's me, Ben. Mama Ellie is right here." But she was just the new maid in a gray apron, messy hair, cracked hands, and he owned the entire hill. Ben turned. His gaze swept across the spot where she hid. Just a moment. One heartbeat. Ellie felt the world stop spinning. But he said nothing. Only frowned slightly, as if he'd heard an old melody whose name he couldn't recall, then walked on toward the library. The heavy oak door closed behind him. Ellie slid down the wall and sat on the floor back against the cold stone. The rain kept falling. Her heart kept beating. And in her mind, the 11-year-old boy still held her hand tightly, whispering through his fever. "Mama Ellie, don't go." The grandfather clock struck 11 in the old library. The entire house had sunk into silence, broken only by rain drumming against the stained glass windows and the faint crackle of the dying fire at the end of the hall. Ellie hadn't dared return to the servants' quarters in the basement. One last bookshelf remained uncleaned, the highest one, where leather-bound volumes no one had touched since the days of the great-grandfather sat gathering dust. She climbed the ladder, hands trembling from exhaustion and fear. Fear of seeing him again. Fear he would recognize her. Fear he wouldn't. The library door opened without a sound. Ellie froze. Benjamin Ashford stepped in white shirt sleeves rolled up top, 2 buttons undone, tie gone. He looked far more human than he had that afternoon, yet still so tall the century-old room seemed to shrink around him. He didn't notice her at first. He walked straight to the fireplace, held his hands to the flames, firelight carving sharp shadows across his face. Ellie tried to climb down to flee, but her feet refused to move. The ladder creaked just once. Ben turned. Their eyes met across the dusty, firelit air. Ellie's heart stopped. Ben frowned, eyes narrowing, as if dragging a memory up from the bottom of a dark lake. "You're the new maid." His voice was low, not cold, only tired. "Yes, sir." Ellie barely heard herself. "It's late. Why are you still working?" "I was afraid Mrs. Crowley would scold me tomorrow." Ben gave a soft huff of laughter, the same half-smile from the portrait, curling only one side of his mouth. "Mrs. Crowley can scold anyone she likes except you." He turned back to the fire. "Go rest when you're done. Don't catch cold." Ellie slid down the ladder, gathered her bucket and rags, and hurried past him, head bowed. Sandalwood smoke and leather brushed her senses. At the door, his voice floated behind her, almost a whisper. "What's your name?" Ellie gripped the doorknob. "Eleanor, sir." but everyone calls me Ellie." Silence stretched long. Then so softly, it might have been meant only for himself, Ellie. The door closed. Ellie fled down the dark stairs, tears falling faster than she could wipe them away. Alone again, Ben sank into the old leather armchair, rubbing his forehead. "Ellie," he repeated louder this time. The name rang like an old song from deep inside the chest he had kept locked for 23 years. The next morning, the rain had softened to a mist. Ellie rose at 5, eyes ringed purple from sleeplessness. She returned to the portrait gallery and cleaned more slowly than the day before, as if she could keep the 11-year-old boy behind glass a little longer. When she reached the 11th portrait, she pulled from her pocket a faded handkerchief, corners embroidered clumsily with a blue E, the only thing she still owned from the orphanage. That year, 11-year-old Ben had sat by the window for 3 nights, stealing Sister Maria's sewing needle stitching, that crooked E, while his eyes burned with unshed tears. He had kissed the letter before pressing it into her 9-year-old hands, whispering, "So, you can dry your tears when you miss me." Ellie pressed the cloth to her cheek. "Are you okay?" "Ben." The handkerchief slipped, fluttered to the marble, and rolled beneath an ancient armchair. Ellie dropped to her knees, groping blindly. Nothing. Panic rising, she shoved the chair aside. Still nothing. Mrs. Crowley appeared at the end of the hall, voice sharp as a blade. "Eleanor, the young master is waiting for breakfast. Kitchen now." Ellie abandoned the search and ran, heart in flames. 2 hours later, Ben returned to the library for papers. He sat in the same armchair and accidentally kicked something soft beneath his foot. He bent and picked it up. The old handkerchief. Blue E, crooked stitches, loose threads dangling. Ben went rigid. Memory crashed over him like a wave. An 11-year-old boy at the St. Agnes window, hands shaking around a needle, eyes stinging. 3 nights of secret stitching for Mama Ellie, the 9-year-old girl who had given him half her last loaf of bread. He had kissed the E before slipping it into her palm for when you cry, missing me. Ben shot to his feet, the cloth clenched in his fist. He ran into the hall, voice raw, "Ellie, Eleanor." Ellie was scrubbing the east staircase. The shout froze her mid-motion. She turned. Ben stood there, towering, eyes red, holding the handkerchief high. "Are you?" "Eleanor Whitaker, St. Agnes. 2008. Ellie let the mop fall. It clattered across the marble. She nodded, tears streaming. Ben crossed the distance in 3 strides and crushed her to him like he was holding a world he thought lost forever. Ellie was tiny in his arms, trembling like the last autumn leaf. Ben held her so tightly she could hear his heart thundering against her ear. Sandalwood wood smoke and the salt of both their tears. "I looked for you for 23 years. His voice broke. "I thought you were—" Ellie shook her head, fingers twisted in his shirt. "I'm still here. I waited for you to get better." They sank onto the cold marble steps, indifferent to everything else. Ben hugged his knees like a child and poured out the story. "That year the Ashfords adopted me. They were kind, but I cried every night because I left you. I hired detectives for 10 years. They said you'd been moved, no trace." Ellie smiled through tears. "I was sent to 3 more homes. Ran away at 15, worked in a laundromat. Slept under Portland bridges 2 winters. Almost froze once." Ben took her hands. His calloused fingers shook when they found the old burn scar on the back of hers. "This is from when you stuck your hand in the stove to save that stray cat, isn't it?" Ellie laughed, still crying. "You remember. I remember everything. His voice cracked. I remember you singing me somewhere over the rainbow, horribly off-key. Remember you giving me the last piece of bread when you were starving. Remember you calling me Mama's good boy. Ellie pressed her forehead to his shoulder and sobbed. I was only 9. I didn't know how to be a mother. I just knew I couldn't let you starve. Ben held her tighter as if she might dissolve. You were my mother. From the day you gave me that bread, they stayed there until night fell. Outside, the rain had stopped. The library fire still crackled. Mrs. Crowley passed by, saw them curled together on the stairs, and silently retreated. Ben dried Ellie's tears with the old embroidered handkerchief. No one will ever send you away again. No one will ever scold you again. Ellie looked up, eyes still red. But I'm just the maid. Ben smiled, the first real smile that reached his eyes in years. No. You're my Mama Ellie. Forever. He stood and offered his hand. Come on. I want to hear every single day you survived without me. Ellie took it warm, steady, sure. The marble hallway no longer felt cold. The rain had stopped falling, and for the first time in 100 years, the old mansion echoed with the sound of happy tears. The next morning, Ashford Manor woke to an atmosphere it had never known. The rain had completely stopped. For the first time in 7 days, Seattle's sky opened to a pale, washed-out blue, with white clouds drifting lazily like handkerchiefs someone had shaken out after a long cry. Ben walked into the grand dining room at exactly 7, white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled high. Ellie sat at the small servant's corner of the table, eyes still puffy, but lips curved in the faintest smile. On the 10-meter-long mahogany table there were only 2 place settings, his and hers. Mrs. Crowley stood in the doorway, face ashen, at the sight of the maid seated on the red velvet chair, reserved for the family. Ben tapped his coffee cup lightly with a spoon. The clear ring echoed through the room. Margaret, as of today, you are no longer housekeeper. You will receive 6 months' full salary and an excellent reference. You may leave before noon. Mrs. Crowley's mouth fell open. But, sir, I have served the Ashford family for 32 years, which is exactly why I will not keep you 1 day longer. His voice was ice. I heard you made Eleanor clean 3-meter-high windows without a safety line. I heard you docked her pay for breaking a single glass. I've heard enough. Mrs. Crowley bowed her head. Her heels made no sound as she left. The door closed behind her like the end of an era. Ben turned to Ellie and slid a gleaming gold key across the table. The East Wing apartment. 3 bedrooms, windows facing Puget Sound. It's yours now. Ellie shook her head frantically. Ben, I can't. You can. And only you can. He took her hand. You kept me alive with half a loaf of bread. Now it's my turn to make sure you never fear hunger again. That afternoon, he summoned the lawyer. In 1 hour, the papers were drawn. Eleanor Whitaker became co-owner of 49% of Ashford Manor and sole trustee of the charity that would forever bear her name. Ellie sat trembling, signing her name for the first time on documents worth millions. 3 weeks later, the old basement, once home to wine racks and cobwebs, was transformed. Ellie painted the walls sunshine yellow. With her own hands, laid thick wool carpets, installed tiny desks and shelves bursting with comic books. Every weekend, a bus brought 12 children from the old St. Agnes Orphanage. They poured into the marble hall, laughter bouncing off the 10-meter ceiling. Ben stood on the staircase looking down, and for the first time he saw the house. Alive. Ellie, in a golden sweater, hair tied high, sat in the middle of the children, telling fairy tales in the same warm voice that once sang him to sleep in the freezing dormitory. Once upon a time, a little boy was abandoned deep in the forest. Was he saved, Sister Ellie? 8-year-old Rosie asked, eyes round. Of course, Ellie smiled, ruffling Rosie's hair. He was saved by a 9-year-old girl who gave him half her last loaf of bread. And that girl became his mama forever. Ben quietly descended and sat cross-legged on the rug with the children. Rosie climbed straight onto his lap. "Are you the boy in the story?" Mr. Ben laughed, the first full, ringing laugh of his 34 years. "Yes, little one. I'm the luckiest boy in the world." That afternoon, for the first time, the marble hallway echoed with a chorus of "You Are My Sunshine." Ellie stood in the center, eyes shining, watching Ben with Rosie on his shoulders. She knew the mansion was no longer cold. It finally had the warmth of family, something both of them had lost long ago. Ellie's 25th birthday fell on a Saturday in November. Ben threw no lavish party. He invited 50 orphaned children and cut the ribbon on the first building of Ellie's Haven, a 4-story orange beacon right beside the old St. Agnes site. The oak sign read, "For every child who once had to share half a loaf of bread, Ellie's Haven, 2025. Ellie stood on the small stage in a turquoise coat, hands shaking around the microphone. I don't know what to say," she choked out. "Only that if a place like this had existed back then, maybe Ben and I wouldn't have had to sleep inside the kitchen cupboard to stay warm." Ben stood beside her, arm around her shoulders, eyes red. "I didn't start this fund because I'm rich," he said loudly. "I started it because I owe someone who saved my life with half a loaf of bread and a hug. From today forward, every orphaned child in Seattle will have a Mama Ellie." Rosie ran onto the stage and wrapped her arms around Ellie's legs. "Are you the Mama Ellie from the picture, the one who embroidered the E?" Ellie knelt and hugged her tight. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm Mama Ellie for all of you." That night, after the buses took the children home, Ellie and Ben stood at the gates of Ellie's Haven, watching the orange neon glow. Ben pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was the old handkerchief with the crooked blue E, now framed in gold leaf glass. "For you. So you never forget that a 9-year-old girl changed my entire world." Ellie burst into tears and threw her arms around him. "No, Ben. We changed each other's worlds." November wind swept past, carrying the scent of dry leaves and fresh-baked bread from the new kitchen of Ellie's Haven. High above Seattle, for the first time in years, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Ellie whispered, "I wish every child could have a hug before bedtime." Ben kissed her forehead. "That wish just came true, Mama Ellie." Rain returned on the second Saturday of December, no longer a downpour, but a quiet, steady weeping, as if someone outside the window were crying very softly. Ellie and Ben stood on the widest balcony of Ashford Manor, 3rd floor, where the whole city of Seattle glittered beneath a veil of fine drizzle. Ellie wore a cream turtleneck, cradling a mug of hot cocoa. Ben had a long wool coat thrown over his shoulders, hands in pockets, shoulder touching hers. "This rain reminds me of winter 2008, Ellie whispered. "It fell exactly like this, only it cut like knives. You were burning at 104 degrees. I was so scared you'd die. I sat up all night, piling every blanket I had on you." Ben bowed his head, wet hair falling across his forehead. "I remember. I woke at 3 in the morning and saw you asleep beside me, lips blue from cold." I cried. For the first time, someone was willing to die for me. Silence stretched long. Only rain and 2 hearts beating in perfect rhythm. Ben turned to her, voice low and warm. Ellie, I used to think money could buy everything, companies, houses, reputation. But I could never buy a hug like the one you gave me that year. Ellie smiled, eyes shining. You already paid it back. You paid it forward to hundreds of other children. That's enough. Ben drew a thick cream envelope from his pocket, sealed with red wax. Read it, whenever you're ready. Ellie opened it beneath the balcony light. Inside was a deed of transfer, 100% ownership of Ashford Manor, signed Benjamin Ashford, conveyed to Eleanor Whittaker. Ellie froze. Ben. No. This has been your home since long before I knew what home meant, he said firmly. I was only keeping it safe for you for 23 years. The rain stopped at midnight. Ellie clutched the envelope to her chest and whispered, Thank you, my son. Ben kissed her hair. Thank you, Mom, for never abandoning me. 1 year later, on the first anniversary of Ellie's haven, the ancestral portrait gallery gained its largest painting ever. A double portrait, Ben in a gray sweater, Ellie in turquoise, standing side by side before the old fireplace. Behind them, 20 children, Rosie in front holding the restored handkerchief embroidered with the blue E. All of them laughing the brightest smiles the century-old walls had ever seen. Gold lettering beneath the frame for the boy who once called me Mama, and the girl who never stopped being one. Benjamin and Eleanor, 2026, the unveiling ceremony filled the marble hall with every child from Ellie's haven. 9-year-old Rosie stood on a chair and read her short speech. Sister Ellie says, Love doesn't need blood. It only needs someone willing to share half a loaf of bread. Today we have 200 loaves, and we have Mama Ellie and Papa Ben. Applause thundered through the hall. Ben wrapped his arms around Ellie from behind and whispered into her ear, Hear that I just got promoted to Papa. Ellie laughed through happy tears. I'll allow it, Papa Ben. Christmas Eve 2026. Ellie returned to her apartment, now the east wing strung with fairy lights and a small fir tree. On the oak table lay a thick green envelope tied with red ribbon. She opened it. Dearest Mama Ellie, by the time you read this, I'll already be on the first flight to New York to sign papers for the 10th Ellie's Haven branch. I didn't say goodbye because I know you hate tears. 24 years ago, when you were 9, you gave me half your last loaf of bread. You didn't know you were giving me an entire lifetime. You are no longer the maid. You are no longer the girl who slept under bridges. You are the woman who brought spring to this frozen house. You are Mama to hundreds of children, and forever Mama to me. I'm leaving you one final gift, official adoption papers. If you sign, I become on paper the son of Eleanor Whittaker. I will take your name, Benjamin Whittaker, because I never want to carry any name but the one belonging to the woman who gave me life a second time. Wait for me, Mama. I'll be home before the snow melts. Your son, Ben. Ellie pressed the letter to her heart and sobbed in the warm, glowing room. Outside, the season's first snow drifted softly over Seattle. Ashford Manor. No Whittaker Manor blazed with Christmas lights. In the fireplace, logs crackled. On the wall, the new portrait shimmered by candlelight. And somewhere across the city, hundreds of children slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow Mama Ellie and Papa Ben would come to tell fairy tales. The tale of a boy and a girl, half a loaf of bread, and a love greater than any bloodline. The rain had stopped long ago. Winter was no longer cold, because at last they were home.